what we've got here is the idea that even with your eyes closed, a sound will mean a lot more to you than it might otherwise. And again, you can perceive a lot of things to do with sound from the way in which you hear it. Okay, so speaking through the microphone here. I've now walked away from the microphone. You can still hear me clearly, but there is completely different qualities to my voice. For a start, there's now a location on my voice. It's right here. Whereas before, I was like this disembodied ghost. So again, if you closed your eyes, you know, it's almost like this divine sort of like, my children, go out into the world, you know, because it's coming from up here. But it's weird because you don't sort of freak out that when I'm over here, I'm not a ventriloquist. I'm not throwing my voice up there, but we know from a technological point of view that the sound is coming from the speakers, wherever they are. All right, so with sound, if you're talking in a 3D world, now the sound is attached to this 3D object. Okay, I'm a 3D model, I've been textured, haven't had my bones done yet, so I can't animate. But, you know, the sound has been attached to me. So wherever I move around in the 3D world, the sound will behave in particular ways. And this is kind of what we're wanting to do with our games. We're wanting to actually recreate things in a slightly more realistic manner. I'm going to have to fill something in on the camera now because I just walked out of camera shot, but that's okay. So this is the whole idea of where we're thinking about sound. And generally I find the way I've perceived my own goal is to understand to people that sound matters. And it matters in far more ways than just, oh, look, you know, you pulled the trigger, the gun's got to go bang. In what way does the gun need to go bang? And I'll actually give you a very, very interesting example. I went and saw Cowboys and Aliens last night. Kind of fun film. One of the things in that I really, really loved the way they did with the guns going bang thing, and I'm not going to give away anything about the movie so much, other than there are aliens in it, well, duh, and there are alien sort of weapony things in it. In fact, Daniel Craig's character, if you've seen any of the previews, has got this thing attached to his wrist that goes kaboom. One of the things they did that was really, really quite interesting, at one point I sort of stopped myself and went, wow, all the cowboy guns sound terrible. Because all the cowboy guns are running around going, you know, pap, pap, pap. And they sounded like cap guns. And I was kind of used to, you know, Hollywood where all the guns sound really, really big. I'm like, why have they made this is really weird? So all the other sound design in it was really quite good, right? So the horses thundering in, there's lots of bass and everything that was really quite good. But, you know, when the cowboys got their guns out, it was just kind of like, you know, starter gun going pap, pap. And then it got to the point where Daniel Craig finally fires off this thing attached to his wrist. And I realized, this is why the cowboy guns in this particular one have been designed to sound anemic. So that when the alien gun goes off, it sounds like all hell breaks loose. Whereas if this had been entirely just a cowboy film, the guns are threatening. If I point a real gun at any of you, you're going to feel threatened. If you know it's a real gun, even if you don't know whether it's loaded or not, you're going to feel threatened. And this is one of the things we do with sound. By giving something a giant sound in a film or a game, we are giving it presence. We are giving it some sort of level of importance. So in this particular case, what they've done is they've made a choice. The cowboys' guns need to be anemic so that when the alien gun goes off, you understand that the alien guns are far more powerful, far more devastating. And we can see that in the effect. You know, they blow up holes in the ground and burn holes in people. But it's not just the visuals, right? If you had this gun that sort of blew a giant hole in the wall but just sort of went, you'd be like, oh, okay, you know. And so this is where the sound is supporting the narrative. And that's one of the other things that I am constantly trying to really, really force into people's brains and thought patterns. Sound's primary job is to be supportive of narrative because we are telling stories. Even Fruit Ninja is essentially telling a story. It might be in a 2.7 minute burst, but it's still telling a story. So, to get on to the topic of where we are going with this today is the whole idea that with a lot of the people who are here and a lot of the things to do with Freeplay is we're talking about smaller end projects. Now, handmade doesn't necessarily mean that it's a small scope, but I would suggest that not many of us are in a position to go out and make full budget PS3 titles. So a lot of us are working on smaller titles, and again, with Halfbrick, they've decided, well, let's do something for the iPhone because it's small, it's easily available, it's potentially easier to develop on, and a lot of these other sorts of reasons. So let's assume that we are talking about mobile devices for the course of today. iPhones, Android, iPad, even DS and PSP. It's relevant. All of these things are relevant for what I want to talk about. There is one very common mistake that a lot of people make when they are developing for these platforms. They approach sound in exactly the same way as they would for the larger platforms. And I'm actually going to cite an example here. And it's not supposed to be disrespectful in any way. It's just a very, very good example because other than the music in this game, I think this game is just absolutely outstanding. And that's the original Puzzle Quest game, also made by an Australian company. Now, Puzzle Quest, I absolutely adore in that the mechanic and everything like that is really, really fantastic. And I've got it on DS, so I've played it on DS. My problem is that it's a game that's being created for a small platform, thus we have the issue with limited resources. And so what's happened with Puzzle Quest, and this is just an example that I'm speaking of because it's one I've played a lot, but this happens with so many other games, and in fact the Japanese RPG games do it all the time. When I first started playing Puzzle Quest, like, yep, cool, we've got the little theme, it's the opening theme of the game, and then we go and we've got our little traveling music, and then we get into a fight, and we've got our little fight music. But because of the limitations of the hardware, we can't have a fully symphonic piece of music that's going to, you know, chop and change, and as the action changes, it reacts to what we're doing, etc., etc. What we end up having is we end up having a small little theme that we've decided that's our combat theme. Great. And this is our little theme over here, and that's our travel theme. Also okay. And here's our little talking to the elf theme, perhaps. The problem with these is that, especially with something like Puzzle Quest, I've played dozens and dozens and dozens of hours of Puzzle Quest. Sadly, I switched the sound off because that little combat theme was very, very short, and within a very short period of time gets really quite annoying. Because there's this traditional idea of, well, we write music in the same way that we write music for other media. And this is where the games industry, I think, needs to really say, well, the film and television guys are going off in that direction. We need to go off in that direction. And this is not just through being stubborn. This is through the realization that, firstly, we are not a linear media. Secondly, there are very, very few films that you sit down that you would potentially sit down and watch for 50 or 100 hours. And I've probably put 50 or 100 hours into Puzzle Quest. I've put 50 or 100 hours into Final Fantasy Tactics, and Final Fantasy Tactics has the exact same problem, a couple of little melodic themes. We have to change the way we think, especially on mobile platforms. Little melodic themes are not only not appropriate, they are actually damaging to your product. And I will say that really confidently because I don't care if you've written the best theme in the world. Choose your favorite musician. I don't care who it is, whether it's Beethoven or Lady Gaga. But if I give you the main theme out of a Beethoven piece or the main theme out of a Lady Gaga piece and play it to you on a repeating loop over and over and over and over and over, you will want to kill me. So this has got nothing to do with whether you're writing good music or whether you're writing average music. It's got to do with what the purpose of the music is. Now, on the musical basis, and in fact a lot of what I'll be talking about today is actually dealing with what is called generative sound production. Now I'm going to be using Fmod as an example to demonstrate some of these examples. Fmod is not the only program that can do this, and I want to say that very, very clearly. I do also want to say that I've done work with Fmod, with the Fmod guys. I recently redid some of the demonstrations I'm showing you here and redid some of their manuals. So yes, I do get paid by Fmod, but I'm not promoting Fmod because of that. I'm demonstrating in Fmod because I use Fmod. So I understand it. But I'm also going to very clearly indicate that there are other programs that are capable of doing this. And in fact, you could probably just do it yourself in code. And in some of the things that I'm talking about, which are really simple ones, I will check with the coders in the room. But from what I'm aware of, some of the things I'm going to suggest to you are actually not very hard to do in code either. All right, so I'm going to show you, the reason why I'm demonstrating this in Fmod is because it just allows us to branch out the discussion fairly easily, okay? So I just wanted to make that clear. So generative audio is all about really where I think the games industry kind of should be going and in some ways sort of has to go. And I'll give you the example of, at the moment I'm playing some more Fallout 3, wonderful game. And again, I've spent hours and hours and hours on that. I've just got the expansions, so I'm spending even more time. Now, the thing about generative audio is it's, and generative music is it's not an all or nothing. If you want to have a game where you want to have the London Symphony Orchestra because you've got a massive budget and you want to have the theme for the evil bad guy and you want to have the theme for the good guy and all that sort of stuff and you want to have these lovely themes for the cutscenes and everything like that, awesome, fantastic, appropriate and can be done really, really well. But if this game's got 40 to 50 hours of gameplay, you are not going to record 40 to 50 hours worth of music with the London Symphony Orchestra. Let me tell you, the budget on that would keep most of us going for quite some time. And this is one of the things that there's been a few people talking about generative music and generative audio as though it's an all or nothing. And it's not. You can still have your wonderful cutscenes and your opening scene and your bit where you walk into the room and there's Darth Vader and it gets the dramatic piece of orchestral music playing, etc. But when you're spending literally tens and tens and tens of hours wandering around a blasted wasteland, or wandering around GTA Liberty City, or wandering around, where is Oblivion set? In Oblivion, wandering around where Oblivion is. Any of these games. The current thought behind this is, yeah, look, just get 2 or 3 pieces of music that are sort of fairly calm and we'll bring those in and play those and then throw them away when we're done and then maybe bring one back later on. Then maybe we'll have silence. And this is where generative music would actually fill the gap. So what we would do is we would have our generative music in one area of the game and our beautifully bespoke thematic music in another area. All right. So now I need to explain to you what exactly is generative music and what do I mean by that. Well, before I go quite into that, I'm going to just go back to the whole idea of, well, I've just said don't have thematic stuff for our little console one. So for Oblivion or Fallout, we can have our big, long orchestral pieces and that's nice and they take up lots of space. We don't want to have thematic stuff. We don't want to have thematic stuff on our small things. Generative music can actually produce either. What I'm talking about with a small platform is what you actually want is something that just gives you a feeling of atmosphere.